Well, good evening. It's 7 o'clock. It's Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019. We're in the council chambers in Platteville, Wisconsin. I call this meeting to order of the Common Council. We'll start with roll call.
Isaac Shanley.
Here.
Eileen Nichols.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Here.
Robin Klein is excused. Sina Sharp.
Here.
Barbara Stockhausen.
Here.
The first thing on our agenda tonight is consideration of the consent calendar. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. Please indicate if you would prefer separate discussion or action on any items. The first of those are the council minutes from April 9th. The second is payment of bills. The third are appointments to boards and commissions. And I have distributed the council appointments, so everybody should have their appointments as far as boards and commissions. If you did not get one or you want to talk about it, let me know. Additionally, tonight I'm appointing Tom Knoll and Nikki Klein to the library board for 3-year terms ending May 1st, 2022, and Melissa Duvey to the Housing Authority Board for a 5-year term ending May 1st, 2024. Additional on here are licenses, extended license premises at Nick's, located at 74 North 2nd Street on May 4th for the annual Derby Days. It would include 2 public parking lots. Temporary Class B fermented malt beverage and wine license to St. Mary's School on Court Street for a block party on Saturday, May 27th. Let's see. We also have temporary Class B license to sell fermented malt beverages to the Southwest Wisconsin Rotary Club here in our auditorium for the Bluegrass Festival that's scheduled for Friday, May 3rd, and for Derby Days on May 4th. And another temporary Class B fermented malt beverages license to the Platteville Main Street for the Walk Down Main on Tuesday, May 7th. There are several 1-year and 2-year operator licenses. There are some street closing permits. 1 Court Street between St. Mary's School and Church on Saturday, May 27th for the St. Mary's School Festival, and a 3rd Street from Main Street to Mineral Street on Saturday, May 4th for Derby Days.
Barb, you said May 27th, it's actually
Oh,
April 27th.
April 27th.
In both times.
Okay.
I would make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. We'll vote.
Shanley.
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
Killian.
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Sharp.
Yes.
Stockhausen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next on our agenda are citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. And before we start that, I would like to offer thanks to Candace, who has developed a little procedural document that you'll find on the table as you enter, as well as instructions there in bigger print about how to register on these green sheets in case you want to speak. But we do have a procedure that during citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, and other items on the agenda that you have interest in, you would register to speak on one of these. So thank you, Candace. The other thing I want to start with is a special thanks to our team here at the city. Today when I got home, I found my 53818 for the spring, and they do a tremendous job. I learn a lot every time I read it, and if you got yours in the mail today, please take a look. It's full of all kinds of good information, and again, thank you to everyone who's involved in putting that together. I do have 3 people who, first of all, I have one person, Lauren. Where is Lauren? Lauren, we've already passed the St. Mary's Festival, but do you want to talk about it? Well, to start with you.
So I actually needed to.
You need to say your name and your address.
Okay, Lauren Furr, 6903 Fawn Court in Platteville. So we needed to actually make a request that I didn't get in time for an additional partial street closure for the evening. I brought maps if that makes it any easier. To the west of the school, we have a concrete area as well as some grassy area where some of the college students were going to have a soccer game. So there will be some traffic between the St. Mary's School parking lot on the north end and then our west side. Between that is Bonson Street, and so we were requesting a street closure just for the portion where the school property is, the parking lot and the grassy area. We would not close the street to the south where we have residential areas, so they would still be able to park in that section.
Okay, so Lauren, I'm going to refer you to the city manager and to our chief of police. By law, the council cannot take action on items that are not on the agenda.
Okay.
So you will need to work with our chief of police and our city manager as to if and how that request might be considered.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, next in citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, I have several people who want to talk about the upcoming Business Highway 151 project. So Christina, would you like to start?
Good evening. Christina Fields, 945 7th Avenue, and I'm also the chair of the Community Safe Routes Committee. And I appreciate the time that I can take to talk to you tonight. I will do my best to keep it within 5 minutes. And first off, I just really appreciate the relationship that the Community Safe Routes Committee has had with this committee. The relationship has really helped us make a lot of improvements for cycling and pedestrians in our community, and we're hoping to keep that going. So the reason I'm here tonight is I want to share my excitement about the upcoming Business 151 project, but I also want to share my concerns about part of the project. And so that's what I'm going to try to get into here. The last thing I'd really want to happen would be 2 years from now, have a conversation with anyone at the city and they say, well, it would have been nice if you would have told us that 2 years ago. So that's really why I'm here. So most of you know my qualifications. I'm going to read part of the letter that I prepared for you. I don't have time to read the entire thing to you, so I'll kind of summarize the points that I want to make, and then afterwards I'll give my letter to you with an attachment. So my qualifications, I am the chair of the Community Safe Routes Committee, and basically we are tasked to look at bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in the city. So our group specifically looks at that for projects, and we come up with plans and designs for bike ped stuff in the city. So I'm the chair of that committee. So I feel somewhat ethically bound to come here and talk to you about some of the concerns I have with the project, but also share my excitement of part of it as well. So the reason I'm here today now is because the city is just about to sign a contract with a new designer for this project. And it's become clear throughout this process that the design that was originally kind of proposed by WISDOT is actually the actual design that we're going to get. I don't feel like the public involvement process has really happened how it was supposed to. So I'll elaborate that. First off, just to give you a reminder of what Business 151 looks like. The section I really want to address is from the west property line of Dairy Queen over to Staley Avenue. That's the section that I'm concerned about on Business 151. So that section, what it looks like, it's one travel lane in each direction, and then there's wide paved shoulders that are adjacent to those travel lanes. And so that's the section I want to focus on. The section from there east, so from Dairy Queen east, is super exciting for the city. There's lots of great improvements for motorists, for bicycles, and pedestrians. And so in looking in that section of the corridor, it's like they're really focused on all the users. And then for some reason in the other section, we really only focused on motorists, and that really has me concerned. So I want to share what I'm concerned about. So the proposed design will take the existing paved shoulders that are there, and they'll use the space for that, and they'll put in a two-way left turn lane. So you'll have two single travel lanes, and then you'll have a two-lane left turn lane in the middle, but it will completely eliminate the space for biking and walking in that section. And so that's my concern. So my area, the focus of my concerns are kind of in 3 areas. One is I want to talk about the public involvement process that we were part of. The second one is the state didn't necessarily follow the process that they are supposed to follow. And then the third thing I do want to do is point out why I think this is an unsafe situation. So as far as the public involvement process, back in September on the 12th, there was a public meeting, and it was marketed as a preliminary meeting to the public, specifically focused on property owners along that corridor. And so I went to the meeting, as did other members of the public and other members of our committee, and we shared some of our concerns about what we saw with that design. I felt like the elimination of the paved shoulders and the elimination of that space is not something that should happen. If the state takes something from you, they should give you something back in return. So what they're doing is they're taking city infrastructure for bikes and peds, and they're giving it to motorists, but they're giving nothing back in return for bikes and peds. It's not really how it's supposed to operate. And so I shared my concerns with Howard, and he has addressed WSDOT and asked. My concern is that the person he's talking to is not really familiar with how the public involvement process is supposed to work, is not familiar with the state policies for how the process is supposed to actually be facilitated. And so I'll kind of elaborate on that in a minute. So at that September 12th meeting, I specifically asked towards the end of the meeting, so this design that you're proposing to us, is this the final design, or will I have an opportunity to comment? And they said, you'll have an opportunity to comment. There'll be other designs to look at. And so I said, and I reiterated, is this the final design or not the final design? No, it's not the final design. So I left that meeting. I didn't come to the September 25th meeting purposefully because that was the meeting where you are going to accept the project. Because I thought, no problem. I love the majority of the project. This part I don't like, but I'm going to have the opportunity to comment on it in the future. And so I didn't attend that meeting there. On the 25th, the city accepted that project, and now it's kind of moving forward to a new designer who's going to get into the details of the construction drawings. So I don't feel like the public process was really followed, and it appears as though the longer I get away from that public meeting, the clearer it is that the state has already decided that this is the design, and that's really not supposed to how the public process is supposed to happen. So that leads me to my next concern, which is that Wisconsin DOT has a very specific, so Department of Transportation, they have a design manual, and in that manual there is a process called community sensitive design or context sensitive design. And basically what that requires, and they say it themselves, it's required, and it's required before design, and they underline the word before, is that since a designer who's going to design for a community most likely doesn't live in the community, they could live anywhere in the state really, they have to go through a public involvement process that takes in the understanding of the context of the situation. So understand the land use, understand how the people are using whatever that infrastructure would be. So how is Business 151 in this corridor being used by the students, the neighborhoods, the businesses, all of that. So it appears as though this process isn't being followed, and that's very concerning because it's supposed to be followed, and they even state in their own manual that it's supposed to be followed. So there's some disconnect here in the public process that I think needs to be fixed. And lastly, I really want to be clear why I think the removal of paved shoulders is really not to the best interest of bicyclists and pedestrians or businesses or anyone kind of in that area. So that I'm going to kind of read that section. So I kind of want the city to acknowledge that if they go through with this proposed design and they remove those existing paved shoulders, these are what the impacts would be. So kind of this is what I think would happen. So I feel it's my job to inform you, the Common Council, that by moving forward with this proposed 3-lane design of Business 151 between the west side of Dairy Queen and Staley, that you're acknowledging the following trade-offs. 1, the city is giving away our existing bicycle and pedestrian paved shoulders. There'll no longer be space for people to bike and walk on that roadway. 2, there will be a reduction in connectivity between where our residents and students live, work, shop, dine in this section of the city. 3, there'll be a loss of space for bicyclists and pedestrians to stores on the side of the road when they want to cross over to those businesses and Katie's Garden and the trail that's over there. 4, there'll be a loss of infrastructure redundancy. So currently, because the bridge was washed out on the trail behind there, the way to access that corridor is to use these paved shoulders. And it's really smart for cities to have redundant infrastructure, so I don't think we should be giving that away. Number 5, the proposed two-way left turn lane does lead to businesses on the south side of the road, but on the north side of the road, the majority of it, leads into a rock wall. So it benefits Pizza Hut. It won't change the situation really for Dairy Queen, and in the middle is a rock wall. So we're turning on that side into, there's nothing there. And 6, I just want to recap who I think most would be impacted by this project if we went ahead with this design. There's a 620 bed Roundtree Commons, which is right close to this location. Those students access, work at, shop at, dine at, spend money at the businesses along that corridor. They won't be able to safely cross. There'd be no place for them to stand while they're waiting to cross. There's a lot of traffic in that section. There are 6 businesses, and some of them have multiple businesses that are in that corridor. I would think they would be impacted because they can't have that access. There's neighborhoods on both sides of the roadway, and it's really a gateway to the city in either direction. We can access the trail on the one side, we can access the businesses, but then there's a whole set of neighborhoods on the south side who want to connect to the city on the north side. And if they want to walk and bike to do that, this is a piece of infrastructure that they're currently using. And then really it's just reduced access for anybody who would want to use this section. So I would encourage the city to do a couple things. First off, we need to follow the public involvement process. We need to understand, and the state needs to understand, how we use this corridor and make sure that the design that we have, it isn't the only option. We have some other things that we could do. For example, we could, if we wanted to, we could paint bike lanes in that section today. It's wide enough, and that is infrastructure. If you did that, then the state would have to replace it if they disturbed it. So for some reason right now they're not considering our paved shoulders as cycling infrastructure, even though in their own manual, the very first type of infrastructure they talk about in their bike design manual is paved shoulders. So there's a disconnect there. So they're not necessarily, I just don't feel like they're following the process. They're definitely not following the community design process. The other thing we could do is just leave it alone. That section of the corridor has paved shoulders. It's what we've been using. They're nice and wide. There hasn't been a lot of bike or ped crashes in that corridor, and I really think it's because there's a lot of space there. As soon as we take that space away and we give it to the motorists, then we're protecting the motorists, but now we're exposing our most vulnerable users, who are our cyclists and our pedestrians. So I would just encourage the city to follow the public involvement process, encourage the state to follow their own process, and kind of try to figure out at the state, like, why aren't they following it? And how can we get them to do it? And then really look at this design and protect our most vulnerable users. So thank you.
And Christina, you're going to pass something out. Okay. Next up, Dave Ralph wants to talk about the Business 151 project.
Thank you very much. I'm Dave Ralph. My address is 75 North Oak Street, apartment 307. And I want to thank Christina for doing an excellent job of summarizing her letter, and you'll get a lot more factual reinforcement out of the letter also. I'm also a member of the Safety Routes Committee here in town. And the thing that hit the red flag with me, especially after I spent about 30 years in the newspaper business covering government, was when there really doesn't seem to have been adequate public hearings or public input on this before getting seriously wrapped up in what looks like is the final design. Because if you go past and do something without talking to the people who live there that are actually affected by this, about 95% of the time you end up with a mistake down the road. And in this case, since it involves safety, it's a pretty serious issue, whether it's motorists, bicyclists, pedestrians, or whatever. And I know the community's done a fantastic job with developing the trails and all types of things, and I would hate to see the DQ to Staley Avenue area become a mistake, because that is a very key piece of territory for transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And we have Evan Larson, who wants to speak about the Business Highway 151 design.
Evan Larson at 1010 7th Avenue. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. And similar to Christina and Dave and a lot of people, I'm very excited about the changes. And I was at the September meeting as well. And one of the things I want to point out is that there were a few points in that meeting where I felt like we had a really good conversation and that ideas came out for other parts of the trail that I think improved the project. And so it was really fun to see that, and it was exciting and inspiring. I want to come up and just talk about my view on this project as it reflects our community, and kind of thinking, down the road. I guess that could be a pun or it could be very literal. So if you think about the vibrancy of communities and you think about small rural communities like Platteville, connectivity, bikeability, walkability are really important for when people are looking for where they want to call home. I've been in the community for 9 years now, which I know is not long, but I feel like we're starting to get a sense and starting to feel at home. And during that time, there's been a new path around Smith Park that has an immense amount of use. Sharrows on Main Street, bike paths painted out, and the PCA trail. And it's been incredible. I use all of these things to see the response of the community. And it really is a powerful example of when you have the infrastructure, people use it, and it creates an identity and excitement about this place that I think is really important. And thinking about this project, I know it's complex. I know we're working with the state. I know that it's a small part of a big project. But I also know that this is a vibrant community and that we have a tremendous amount of agency in these kind of situations. And I really encourage you to feel empowered and to not just go with a solution because it's the one that was proposed, but to really push what you feel is the best thing for this community, and not the easiest, not the quickest, but 10 years from now, having pedestrian friendly connectivity in that area is going to be really important. There are a lot of great businesses. I go through that area all the time on my route to campus where I work. And I see people on the trail, and I know that trail is there, but it's not the same as integrating pedestrian friendly infrastructure with this project. And so I really encourage you to advocate on behalf of the community when you're working with the state and the designers and all these people. And if it's not the right choice, push to get the right choice, because we have that. This is something to make this place better, and I'm excited to see where it goes and to be a part of it. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Evan. Ken, you had,
I have comments on something.
on this?
Anybody else coming up?
No, that's it.
Okay. My comments are about an article in the Wisconsin State Journal this morning, and it talked about a Platteville ambulance that rolled over near Ridgeway, Wisconsin. The city of Platteville and township contributed a considerable amount of money to the hospital as far as the EMS and ambulance cost. And what I'd like to find out here is the reason or reasons for the accident. In this article, it also talked about an accident involving a Madison ambulance in which a person was killed, and they described that vehicle, ambulance, as being a box-style vehicle. So I want to find out whether Platteville has any box-style ambulance vehicles. And so I'm looking for a full report on this situation. Maybe that's already planned, but that is my comment, that's my request as far as this accident. Thank you.
Sure, we can follow up on that. And if I could make just a quick comment on Business Highway 151. As the council is aware, this is a discretionary grant from the state of Wisconsin. We did have a lot of conversation with respect to that aspect of the corridor last fall. And I think Dr. Fields is right when she talks about the state being in somewhat of a fixed position with respect to some of the concerns that were raised. This is the first time this evening I'd heard about concerns with the process that was outlined by the state, so we're happy to follow up with the state and get more information about that with respect to guidelines that they might have and how that fits with our project. I will say, though, that we have already signed the contract for that design work.
So I have a question. So is there any possibility of like keep working and figuring something else out to add to it, or is it just totally done? Like with the suggestions, like, does that make sense at all?
At this point,
Huh?
The requests or the potential changes that are being looked at, DOT is basically saying that if the city of Platteville wants to do something along those lines, they would not stand in our way if we wanted to fund those projects. I know that Dr. Fields and the others have been pushing that it should be part of the state's project where the state should share in the cost for that. But the state has said on a number of occasions that they will not participate in it, but they would allow the city to do so. So we would need to add funding for design of a sidewalk or other facilities in that area and for the construction of those facilities. If that's the will of the council, then we can look at that. But at this point, we'll work with DOT as the city manager said regarding their process.
I have more.
And I think what I'm hearing tonight is that there might be an alternative with respect to the design itself without adding additional facilities. So we're happy to wrap you into that conversation.
Christina, I'm sorry, but you cannot speak from the audience. If you're going to speak, you have to come back to the microphone. But perhaps a better alternative is, since Karen has said they'll look at that process, since we have your letter and they have the letter now, maybe I think perhaps a better alternative than getting into a back and forth tonight would be to see if we could get a little meeting, see where we are with the process, and perhaps at the next meeting we could have a report back and information about what we found. And I mean, I know the project is I know we've talked about the project from the intersection east, and then there's the project from the intersection west, and I think you're talking about the project from the intersection west, and so maybe we can just hear back a little bit about instead of trying to debate it tonight. You may only make it from the microphone.
I just want to make sure it's clear that if the state takes away the paved shoulders, they're making us get new infrastructure. They're making us get a project. If we don't give our infrastructure away, we don't need a project. So they're forcing us to spend money that we don't have. We don't need additional infrastructure because we already have it.
All right, so perhaps between now and the next meeting, we can hear from the state on their process and have some dialogue about this section. Okay, those were the only things I've seen in citizens' comments, observations, and petitions. So we will now go along with reports. There were several reports in the packet. License Committee, that would be Nichols and Sharp.
Ed?
Transportation Committee, that's me. Now, I have nothing to add. I think we'll see items on the agenda later tonight from the Public Transportation Committee. Library Board, Robin is not here. Airport Commission, that would be me. We're anxiously awaiting the delivery of our new above-ground fuel tanks. I guess I would say that. Historic Preservation Commission, Ken?
No addition.
Okay. We have some action items on tonight's agenda, so we'll move along on to the action items then. The first is continuation of the city attorney and special counsel for prosecutorial services. And Nicola.
Thank you. Back a year and a half or so ago, we went through an RFP process for our attorney services. We have a city attorney and a special counsel for prosecutorial services. We also have a charter ordinance that indicates that the city attorney position appointment should be made by a majority vote of the common council. The city currently contracts with Bill Cole of Axley Brynelson for our city attorney services, and we contract with Ben Wood of Wood Law Firm for our prosecutorial services. And Ben is in the audience tonight if the council has any questions for him. This item came up at the last, a couple of meetings ago and was tabled. But what we plan to do in the future is to make this appointment part of the organizational meeting on an annual basis so that the council can have a chance to make that decision. And we'll also ask the council to let us know if there's any concern about continuing with any of those attorney services. And I believe Karen also has some comment.
And I would just add that there had been a concern raised by Ken when this matter originally came forward. I did have a conversation with the person that had expressed some concern and did some follow-up with respect to the issue and feel comfortable that we have a good path moving forward.
Ben, you're in the audience tonight, and I don't know if everybody on the council knows you, but why don't you come to the podium and at least that way your picture is on the on the web stream, and you can say your name and where you are. I mean, otherwise I don't know that anybody
Sure.
has any questions, but.
Yeah, my name is Ben Wood. I'm an attorney in Fenimore, Wisconsin, and that's where I reside, and that's where I'm from, and been a pleasure working with you guys for a year and a half. I know a lot of people from my work with Southwest Tech and things, so I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. Glad to see all the students here. That's good to see. So.
Okay, thank you.
You bet, yeah.
Okay, so does anybody now have any questions on the contract for legal services, both the contract for city attorney and the contract for prosecutorial services?
So it will not be a 2-year contract, it'll be like a rollover contract.
Yes, the language in the contract is that the contract can be terminated by either party, but there will not be a formal renewal term in the contract, but it will come before the council on an annual basis for approval.
Good, I see you took out the dates for Mr. Wood,
We
which
felt
was
it would be less-
2018 to 2020,
Yes, sir.
and there weren't any dates for the other attorney whatsoever, except that he signed the contract in November 2017
Right.
and would continue until terminated. So this is going to be a yearly thing, not 2 years.
So there will not be a defined term in the contracts, and when we went through the RFP process, the two different attorneys provided their own contracts with their own language, and so there happened to be some minor differences between the two because there wasn't, we didn't provide a boilerplate template for them, but that they provided their own contracts. But now that we've examined these, and because of the questions that came up about the terms, we felt it would be better to have the two contracts be consistent on that language. And so we asked Attorney Wood to update his contract so that both contracts would indicate that, that the contract could be terminated by the council at its discretion, but that without that action, that the contracts would continue with the approval of the council. And we decided that it would be best to do that as part of the organizational meeting on an annual basis.
I guess I would just add that from our perspective, we felt that actually the language that either party could terminate with, I think, 90 days notice.
Notice, yeah.
With 90 days notice was actually more favorable, a more favorable arrangement than having the specified period.
Not following the charter ordinance, only part of it. So,
We will bring it back, though, for the council to give us direction with respect to whether they want to continue the contract or whether they'd like us to pursue an RFP for the attorney services.
Other questions?
so you're gonna possibly bring it back to change the charter ordinance? Is that the idea?
We could do that to, if you feel that that is not consistent enough, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, because the charter ordinance, we've had it for a long time, it's 1967. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I'd be looking for a motion.
I move to approve the contracts.
Second.
Okay, I have
If I, sorry, if I could interject, it does need to be removed from the table before we can
Oh.
make any action.
Okay. First of all, we need to have a motion to remove this from the table.
I move to remove the subject from the table.
Second.
All right, we'll vote.
Shanley?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes,
Doss?
Yes.
Sharp?
Yes.
Stockhausen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Now we'll take a motion on the contracts.
I move to approve the continuation of services with Bill Cole for city attorney and Ben Wood of Wood Law Firm for special counsel.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Shanley?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes,
Doss?
Yes.
Sharp?
Yes.
Stockhausen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda, thanks, Ben, is the acceptance of the housing study. And Joe isn't here, so that's going to be Karen.
Yep, I'll take this. A few weeks ago, a representative from Beer was here to give the council an overview of the results of the housing study. We actually had a lot of internal discussion about whether or not we should bring this back for acceptance, but because I had mentioned at that time that we would, we are bringing it forward just as a housekeeping matter. So this is largely a formality. We are having more in-depth discussions based on the outcomes of that study. We've already had one series of meetings with WIDA, Southwest CAP, other potential funding partners, and we're going to have follow-up meetings next Monday with a number of cities that have implemented different types of housing programs. So there is work being done. Our goal is to bring back some different ideas for the council to consider, as well as some of our other economic development partners this summer.
Anybody with questions?
I would move to accept the housing study and needs assessment report.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the housing and housing report, housing study report. We'll vote.
Shanley?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes,
Doss?
Yes.
Sharp?
Yes.
Stockhausen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is Contract 219 City Hall HVAC and Phase 1 renovation. Howard.
Yes. Our 2019 capital improvement plan has the first of 3 phases of renovation for City Hall office areas. It's spread over 3 years so that no outside financing is required. total project is expected to cost $750,000. Phase 1 for this year is HVAC for the office areas and renovation of first floor south. Phase 2 next year is renovation of the second floor office areas. Phase 3 would be HVAC and renovation of the first floor north office area. Delta 3 Engineering as our prime architectural consultant and coordinated the bidding process. Tammy Black is the architect. She's in the audience right now if you have technical questions about what she did. We had only one bidder for this first phase of the project, Rock Church Construction. We've gotten together and we believe that there would be more competitive bidding if we bid phase 1 and phase 2 together, with payment for phase 2 occurring in 2020 only. This will guarantee the successful bidder both phases, and that way, for our budget purposes, we would only pay for the phase 1 items this year and phase 2 items next year. As part of this process, Delta 3 would simplify the alternate bids based on our feedback. The risk is that when we rebid this, it could be higher than the original bid that we received. However, staff does feel that we want to recommend rejecting the bids for contract 2-19 and rebid the phase 1 and phase 2 together, with payment for phase 1 in 2019, payment for phase 2 in 2020.
Okay, questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
My question is, you're rejecting the single bid, correct?
That's the recommendation, yes.
Is this single bid information available to other persons? Is this single bid information from that company going to not be available to any future bidders?
It's been opened publicly, so the bid is open. The issue here is that this is a lump sum bid. So if any other contractor besides Rock Church Construction wants to look at that, they don't know how much Rock Church allocated towards each individual piece because it's a lump sum bid. They would only know that Rock Church made the lump sum bid $320,209.
So it doesn't say how much was for removing walls or painting or putting up new or HVAC or anything. It's just a lump sum.
Correct. I mean, we do have alternates that are in there, but the main portion is just a lump sum.
So the hope is that you're going to get more bidders for the work, correct?
Yes.
And Rock Church may not necessarily bid on anything. You may wind up with, the city may wind up with no bidders.
That is a risk, yes. We have made some informal contacts, and we have multiple bidders who have said that they would be likely to bid if we bid both phases together. They wouldn't promise us, but they said that it would be more lucrative, more advantageous if we bid them both together.
I guess I look at it from the standpoint of the old saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush.
That's a valid argument. But our analysis says that we feel that we can get the better bid for both phases.
But in addition to the dollar amount is also the reputation of the bidder as far as doing this type of work.
Are you questioning the ability of Rock Church to do this?
No, I'm not questioning Rock Church.
Is that what?
I think,
My question is, was Rock Church an acceptable bid? It was.
Yes.
It was under bid, correct? Was
Yes.
under bid? Okay.
Yes. In our discussions, staff and Delta 3 felt that we have the possibility of getting multiple bidders, which means hopefully more competition. They'll sharpen their pencils a little bit more, work on the spreadsheets, however you want to call it, to give us better pricing, not only for phase one, but for phase two as well, so that we can enjoy efficiencies, so that the contractor can schedule the work much better and much cleaner, knowing that they have both phases of the work, that they've been awarded both phases.
I guess I could add that we had 3 well-known reputable construction companies come through the walkthrough. So the pre-construction or the pre-bid walkthrough. So we were a little surprised to just get the sole bidder. When Tammy did some follow-up inquiries, one of the reasons appeared to be the fact of how the project was phased. Because the first phase involves a lot of subcontract work, and the general contractor would still need to be on site to supervise that. So it's not very efficient, whereas phase 2 is much more intensive with respect to the work that the general contractor would actually do. I hope I summarized that correctly, but.
I have a question. Do you anticipate if we were to do this, that it would delay the project any? Looking for trying to get more bids? Or do you think the timeline would be the same with starting construction?
I think we're pretty good with the timeline. We did have a little bit of slack towards the end of the year, understanding that there's holidays and everything else. So we feel that even if we go out to rebid, it would, be put out to the paper immediately for next week, not tomorrow, but the following week, and we would make sure that all the local bidders had an opportunity to see that.
any other questions? Okay, the recommendation of staff is to reject the bid from Rock Church.
It's also noted in the staff report that this combining phase 1 and phase 2 would likely result in project efficiencies, and I can actually understand that. If you've got one construction firm working on phase 1 and phase 2, it just seems like that would make things go smoother. Otherwise, you're stopping on one, and if you have a different bidder for phase 2, then I think that makes it less efficient. I see something about simplifying the alternate bids based on staff feedback, so if I'm looking at this chart correctly, some were added and some were deducted.
Yes. Initially, we were looking at different alternates. For example, the chair rail, like you see around this room here. We weren't sure whether or not we wanted to have, say, the contractor do that, or whether we wanted to wait and have staff do that later at some future time. Things of that nature. So we sat down and we worked through all of that, and we decided which way we wanted to go, so that we would reduce a lot of these alternates, which reduces the complexity for the bidding process.
Well, I would move to reject all bids for contract 219 City Hall HVAC and phase 1 renovation, and to direct staff to rebid phase 1 and phase 2 together with payment for phase 1 in 2019 and payment for phase 2 in 2020.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to reject the bids for contract 219. We'll vote.
Shanley,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Sharp,
Yes.
Stockhausen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that ends the items on our action agenda tonight. We'll move on to our information agenda. And the first item on that agenda is establish agency fares for the taxi. So this comes with Catherine. Would you like to talk about this?
Yes, so currently human service agencies are paying $2.75 for a one-way taxi ride, the same cost that any other adult rider pays for a one-way ride. If you're elderly, disabled, or a child, you pay $2.50. The average cost per ride on shared ride taxi system statewide in 2017 was about $9. Because we receive federal funding, the cost for one-way rides are less. So charges in the $5 to $9 range are reasonable for agency fares. And just a little backup information on agency fares, their human service agencies purchase punch cards for their clients and to make sure their clients have transportation. If they didn't have the share ride taxi, they would be paying more, but we have that option in Platteville. Establishing an agency fare allows the transit system to recoup full expense of providing rides to human service agency clients, ensuring that such rides do not reduce state and federal aids designated for providing transit service to the public at large. Human service agency fares are typically collected directly from the organization for which the service is to be delivered, not the individual passenger. Agency fares collected as a result of a contract for individual rides must be counted as fare revenue and not local share. So in effect, agency fares represent a compromise so that public transit systems can recover service costs while human service organizations can utilize our public transit for a lower cost than would be paid to private providers. Running Inc. is our taxi operator, and they operate in 18 communities in Wisconsin, and Platteville is the only community that does not have an agency fare. I did ask for their range. It's anywhere from $4 to $8. And Running Inc. actually foresees anyone that's only charging the $4 to increase that very soon. So the Platteville Transportation Committee made a motion to approve a resolution to institute an agency fare of $6, not the full $8 that some other communities are charging. And that's for a one-way ride to begin on June 1st, 2019. This would hopefully offset some of the costs that we have for the taxi.
So the basic charge is going from $2.75 for one way, correct?
For our human service, so regular clients or someone that just calls for a ride, they're still going to pay the $2.75. Human service agencies actually have a different funding pool than what we have, and it's designated for this. If they're not being charged that, they actually use that funding for other things, but they should be allocating it for their clients on taxi rides. So instead of paying $2.75, yes, we are suggesting $6 because that reflects more of what an actual taxi ride would cost.
So going from $2.75 to $6, and there's no help to go to the client as far as the difference between $6 and $2.75?
Right, the client doesn't have to pay the charge. They are not being charged. They don't actually interact right now with the cab. They have a punch card. The clients usually get punch cards, and the human service agency fare is just paying that $2.75. But we're requesting to charge the $6.
Well, then as far as if we don't have anybody covered by human service agency, then John Q. Public coming to ride the cab would pay how much? $6?
No, if they're an adult, it's $2.75. If they're elderly, disabled, or a child, it's $2.50.
Who's going to pay the $6?
So Inclusa is one of the agencies, a human service agency, and they have clients that they provide these punch cards for. And so it's a human service agency that receives funding from the state.
I think I was just appointed to this committee. This is public transportation.
Yes, I don't think you were appointed, Bill, unless I have a different.
I think he was, unless I put it in the wrong place.
Well, I received a different email earlier, so.
Did I put it in the wrong? I might have,
I don't
when
know.
I went down.
In there. Was Don Francis on this one? No? Was
No,
he on
Barb was
Safer?
actually the
Actually-
previous.
Did you have Isaac's name on it?
I had Isaac.
Yeah, I think I got the X in the wrong spot, because I think I appointed Isaac to that committee.
Should be in there?
Isaac.
It
Oh,
is
Isaac.
Isaac on the original.
Yeah, I think Isaac is on, you guys, you have the original. I quickly filled out a new one tonight because Colette's been contacting people. I kind of had a cross up and didn't say make copies for everyone, so then I took and quickly. I hope there aren't any other issues, but I did appoint Isaac to the public transportation, so you don't have to worry about that one, Ken.
But I am worried about the cost.
So basically, there are two ways that people may have rides on our system. One is just the individual user, a private individual, calls for the taxi and they're charged the normal rate, and the state and federal dollars that the Platteville transportation system receives helps to subsidize that cost. The other way people may ride the system is because a human service agency has provided rides for them and they're purchasing the rides on behalf of the client. And that's where what's being proposed is that rate would be raised to $6 because that reflects the true cost of providing the service. And these human service agencies are receiving funding from federal sources that helps them to offset the cost of this transportation.
Well, someday, Catherine, when it's rainy outside, I'll come in and you can try to beat this into my.
Okay.
All right, well, as long as we're talking about the agency fares for the taxi, I think that we have another one on establishing a standard parcel charge.
Yes.
So Ken, you might have to spend longer in the afternoon.
And this came from a meeting that I had with Running in regards to several things, but this came out of it too. So currently the city has two parcel charges. One is prescription, which is $10. A client does pay that. And then we have a wheelchair return, which is $3.50, and that's usually the hospital. The taxi has an agreement with Phillips Pharmacy and Walgreens to pick up prescriptions for patients without the patient needing to be in the taxi. The wheelchair charge is when the wheelchairs must be returned to the original destination. The wheelchair charge is not an additional charge when a rider has a wheelchair. Wanted to make that clear. And to assist accounting staff with accounting, staff recommends having a standard $10 parcel charge. It just helps with accounting, less lines to have to go through. So the Platteville Transportation Committee also made a motion to approve the standard $10 parcel charge.
Well, this was a little hard for me to understand because I was on the Public Transportation Committee. It's like, what, now we're charging people to have their wheelchair?
Right.
But we're not charging people to have their wheelchair. Where do these wheelchairs come from that we're hauling around?
So in the taxi somewhat provided more information. So let's say someone is leaving the hospital and they might need that wheelchair going back to a nursing home. They use the wheelchair to get back, and then they actually have to go, the taxi has to go back to the senior assisted facility or nursing home to pick up that chair to return it to the hospital. And I've heard sometimes it's difficult to actually get the timing, the scheduling to pick it up. So they've gone several times to pick up that wheelchair. And so $3.50 doesn't actually reflect how much time they're spending to pick up a wheelchair to return to the original destination.
So the original destination for the wheelchair is what? The hospital?
Usually the hospital, yeah.
Usually the hospital. What are some other ones?
I wish Gordy from the taxi was here because he has so many stories to tell, but I'm not sure.
So basically, our taxi is providing a service of picking up prescriptions, delivering them to wherever the person either lives, or if they're in a assisted living or something, they would deliver them there. So that person driving the taxi is actually taking the time to do that. Just that the person that needs a prescription is not in the taxi at the time, but still, it is a trip.
Correct.
And also the same would be true then for the wheelchair, that they need that wheelchair, and then it needs to be returned because they didn't own the wheelchair.
So it takes time, because you have
It
to go
takes
in and
time, yeah.
find the wheelchair and get the wheelchair in the car and then take the wheelchair and give it to someone. So
Yes.
I understand that.
Now, some pharmacies deliver.
And that could, if the client decides to use the taxi cab prescription pickup, there's one agreement between the Phillips Pharmacy and Walgreens. But it's depending on who they would like to use.
Phillips Pharmacy, that's out of the hospital? Is that correct or
Apologize,
not?
I do not know. I don't know, Ken.
I don't know what their name is, used to be Cardin's. They changed it. Anybody know?
I don't know, I'm not familiar with it either, Ken, but obviously the taxi has an agreement with the Phillips Pharmacy and also Walgreens, so,
So whoever Phillips Pharmacy is.
yes,
Yeah.
that would be the agreement.
Yeah. Okay, if anybody has any questions on either of those two, please get to Catherine between now and the next meeting if you need clarification, because both of these items will be on the agenda for action at the next meeting.
Yep.
We'll move on to the last item on our information item, and that is the 2019 City Goals Quarterly Report.
And this item is just for your information. As has been our practice, we provide quarterly updates on the goals that the city council and staff set at the beginning of each year. And so this just gives our progress through the end of March. We will be having a very, very busy spring with the construction, getting ready for construction here at City Hall, plus the delayed projects from fall of 2018. So it's a very exciting time.
I think there are very interesting items in the report. Lead service lines, we've allocated 481,000 of the $500,000 that was allocated. That's wonderful for our residents and for the future of our city to have some of that gone. I don't know if anybody else picked up anything else out of the report they want to particularly say anything about.
As far as roundtable discussions with our partner groups, I think, I noticed that we're meeting with PADIC, Platteville Business Incubator, and Main Street in May. So I think that is something that we as a council try to do, is to talk to other entities within the community so that we all work together on the same page, so to speak.
And I would, in that vein, not in this report, but I would mention that this Thursday morning at the Good Morning Platteville, Ela, who is our executive director of PADIC, will be the featured speaker. So I think that starts at 7:30 at Mound City Bank and goes until about 9 or so. And it is a public opportunity if anybody has interest in another public meeting and they need to have it signed off. Not that there's anybody here looking for public meeting sign off. Anything else?
I have a request. I'd like to get a hard copy of the new employee handbook.
Sure.
Colette was very gracious to give me a copy, 2 copies of the housing study. And I appreciate that because my printer is not a color printer.
Other than that, I only see one item left on our agenda that requires a motion.
Adjourn, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. We'll vote.
Shanley?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Doss?
Yes.
Sharp? Yes.
Stockhausen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
This is it.